welcome to 28 Days and Beyond.
The show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Kharisma. Welcome back.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey.
What's going on?
So,
Yeah.
I have a question. Have you ever thought about the idea of being black versus being treated as if you were black?
No, I have not.
Like at all?
No.
Ever?
What do you, what like, in which way?
So, I was thinking just about the wide variety of shades and tones we come in, right? So, along with that, for our brothers and sisters that are fairer, their skin is fairer, how they are treated versus how someone who is of a darker hue is treated. You get where I'm going?
I see where you keep taking me, keep taking me.
And just what that experience is like here in the United States of America.
Yeah. So you said being black but not being treated
Yes.
black. Okay.
So
there's a different treatment that is allotted to folks, you know, depending on where they fall on the.
where they fall on the spectrum.
Got you.
So in particular, let's say our brothers and sisters that are biracial, if their features take more after, like say they're biracial and one parent is white, one parent is black.
Okay,
if
yeah,
their
I got you,
features,
yeah.
because biracial could mean any, anything. But one parent is white, one parent is black. If their features align more with the white parent, but they still are of African heritage, how that plays into how they're treated when they walk out into the world, when people look at them, if they're treated as a person that has African heritage, or if they're only treated as what the person looks at them and thinks that they are.
Right.
I just think that's a really interesting dynamic.
Man, I'd love to hear more about it.
I would too.
Yeah.
Our guest today is actually, her name is Victoria Nelson,
All right.
and she's here to talk to us about that experience and just everything that comes with it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot.
And I don't know if you've had this experience personally, but you know, having family members that are much fairer than some of my other family members, just seeing their experience, even that dynamic that happens when we're out together. You know, the looks that they might get when people might see them. Like I have my mother's brother's son, when he was first born, he looked like a white child. Blonde hair, green eyes, very, very pale. And what it was like when he went out with us, what that looked like, and people kind of looking like, where are your parents? And we're right there.
Yeah, right.
So
What
just
you doing with them?
whole idea of like what you're treated as based on your appearance.
That's what's up.
So Victoria Nelson will be joining us in just a bit, but we're gonna take a break on 28 Days and Beyond, but we'll be right back right after this.
Welcome back to 28 Days, and we are joined by Victoria Nelson.
Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, how's it going?
Great. How
Excellent.
about you?
Oh, I'm doing all right,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
So before the break, we were talking about being black, but not being treated as black. Tell us a little bit about your experiences.
So I consider myself to be a white passing biracial woman.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of experiences that come with that, because though I do identify as being biracial, it's always like people try and put you in one box or the other. So when I was in the 10th grade, I took the PSAT for the first time, and I got to the box where it was like, check like what your race is, and it said check 1. And so I was like, well, I raised my hand, and I was like, so like what if you're more than one race? The proctor of the exam was like, well, just check whichever one you identify more with. And it's like, I feel like that's constantly been what I've been told, is to always choose. And then there's also this idea that you don't really fit into one box or the other. It's not. It's kind of a nuanced position to be in.
Wow. So in that moment when you were made to choose, how did it make you feel in terms of, did you feel like you were being made to separate yourself from a part of your identity in a way?
Well, being the defiant person I was, I did check both of them anyway.
Good job.
But I think that it was just frustrating to me, because both of those races are like such a big part of my identity and who I am. And I feel like so often we think about things in like white and black terms, but there's so many things that are in between. And I think it's It's a cool experience to have such a different experience from other people, but it's also tough to feel like you're alone, like you're an other. Nobody really knows what to do with you, and it's hard to especially when you're growing up and like discovering who you are. It's hard to identify with someone when not really anyone you can relate to their experience.
Right.
One of the things that we see often is people will acknowledge their biracial heritage, but still choose to identify with one over the other. What was it about your experiences that really has you identifying wholly with both?
I think that growing up around my family, who has been so supportive of me, and making sure that I had relationships with people on my family that identifies as Black and my family that identifies as white. I've built relationships with people that are of different races, and so I think that that's an important part of who I am. And I'm also kind of rebellious, I guess, in that way, that I don't like to do what other people try to tell me to do. Both of those races are part of my identity, and I think that it makes me unique. But I think that coming to that point, you have to go through a lot of realizations and understanding that sometimes people don't see you the way you see yourself.
Can you recall a time, like looking back now, where you distinctly remember people seeing you versus how you saw yourself?
Yes. So the first time that happened to me was in middle school. So I went from like my small town, like elementary school where everybody knew everybody knew my family. But then I went to a middle school that was predominantly Black and Hispanic, and I didn't think much of it, but we had an assembly where they gave out awards, and they called the awards for African American excellence in academics. And so they called my name up, and I was like so excited. I got all A's that quarter. So I stood up, like about to go walk up the front, and then everybody was like, "What?" They were like, "Who's this white girl getting this award?" They were yelling. They were like, "She's not even Black." Like, what? Like, everybody was like yelling at me, and I was like shocked, because all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, maybe people don't see me the way I see myself.
Yeah.
So that was my first time that I realized that like people saw me differently, and with realizing that people can perceive me to be white when they first look at me, that's also come with the responsibility to use that privilege to like speak for others who may not be taken as seriously if they have darker skin. And so that's something that like I've developed like as I've gotten older, but it's taken some harsh realities to realize that.
That's what's up. Well, that's certainly something that we'd like to talk more about when we come back on 28 Days and Beyond.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We were still here with Victoria Nelson. So during the break, we were talking a little bit about a specific experience that you had where you were in school and one of your professors did not know that you were Black and how he spoke. So can you please share that with the folks out there?
Yeah, sure. So in my freshman seminar class, it was a smaller class, about maybe like 20 people, but I was the only student of color in class, and my professor didn't know. So he kind of felt like he could say whatever he wanted. So he would say things like, slavery was necessary in America because someone had to do the work, and things like, the problem in the Black community is bad parenting, and like all of these horrible comments, like saying those people this, those people that. And as soon as I started hearing these comments, I was so frustrated and angered, but I decided to just sit back and start taking notes of what he was saying and see how far he would go before he knew. So I kind of consider myself, like an undercover Black person. But so I was taking notes about what he was saying. But so finally one day I just got so fed up with everything. So he's saying those people this, those people that. So I raised my hand and I'm like, it's really offensive when you use the phrase those people. And he was like, well, I'm sorry that's offensive, but they're not like you and me. And, I said, well, that's interesting you say that because, like my dad is Black. And he goes, well, I'm sorry. Were you born in an unsafe condition? And I'm thinking like,
wow.
What? So that was one of the experiences that I realized that, again, that people don't see me the way I see myself, but those comments still run deep because that is still part of who I am. And that was just a very powerful experience for me here at my university.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like I
that's
don't
it.
even know, I don't even know where to go from that.
Yeah. Have you, I mean, so, but how does this play itself out? I mean, socially. So we know, like, you know, in that environment, but socially, what, you know, you're making decisions just as other people are making decisions about you.
Exactly. So something that I've had to struggle with as well is the idea that sometimes I feel like I have to prove my blackness to other people. So it's like an idea where I'm in Black spaces and I'm talking with other Black people and they're like, are you sure you're Black? Or like, can you prove it? Or like, what is your, because my dad is Black, they're like, oh, what does your dad look like? And like, try and see the picture. And it's not until they see the picture,
Like
can
physically.
see that like we look very much alike. We have very similar features, just the fair skin is different. And that's only, and I have to like, oh, well, like, oh, do you put seasoning on your food? Or like, they say different things like that where you have to like prove, I feel like sometimes I have to prove my Blackness to people. But then there's the idea that, you know, in like the white community, I don't really fit in, and it's like, oh, your hair, like, it's so nice and like curly, it's so like, or it's because I don't really fit in with them either. So it's an idea of like, oh, well, where am I supposed to go? So that's something that I've had to develop, like, as I've gotten older, is like developing my identity as who I am and kind of taking everything with a grain of salt, because I do know that I am treated differently because of my fair skin, and sometimes there are privileges that come with that. And so the fact that I have to prove my Blackness is a privilege in itself, in that like I get to choose technically when people perceive me as Black, which that privilege is not awarded to everyone.
So what do you do with that privilege? Meaning when you're in those spaces where someone doesn't necessarily know that you're Black, how are you able to use that privilege to help?
Right. So something I would say, like, I feel like I use that privilege in a way in that I never deny my Blackness, and that is something that I hold so like dear to my heart. And issues within the Black community, that's something that I advocate for in all spaces that are available. But I also use my privilege to reach members of the white community a little bit more, because sometimes when they first look at me, they can say, oh, like, I can relate with her. So in sometimes bringing in, it's like, oh, when I bring in my experience, it's like, oh, well, maybe not everybody who looks like that like has the same experience. So it's bringing my experiences to different audiences and sort of using code switching in a different way. And that's kind of how I've used it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience. It was very, thank you.
Of
Thank you.
It was great being here. Thank you.
We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond right after this.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. Kharisma.
Yes, Amari.
Well, thoughts?
I think it's just really interesting. One part of Victoria's experience that I thought was particularly interesting was her talking about being in spaces where she can clearly see that the way that she sees herself is not the same as how other people see her, and also using that as an opportunity in some spaces to educate people about misconceptions that they have.
Yeah. You know, I think that I was trying to think about it historically, and what makes things different. So we see a lot more people acknowledging a biracial identity now, identifying biracially, explicitly, right? I was thinking about that, and I was wondering if it had to do with segregation and integration. So where, you know, segregation, if you were biracial, you weren't going to grow up with white people, you were going to grow up with Black people. So that would have become, you know, your identity. But I was also thinking a lot about how, you know, what is the balance between identity being a choice made by you and a choice made by others? They're trying, you know, they will project onto you what you are versus what you choose. And I think with what you're saying is that she is being definitive in her decision to identify biracially.
Yeah, and I think that's important because in a space where we still operate under a system of white supremacy, someone who is perceived by others as being white, upon first looking without a conversation or anything else, could potentially have an opportunity to present themselves as the thing that more people are comfortable with. And the fact that she's definitively choosing not to do that and to say, no, I identify with both parts of who I am, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to help people understand the beauty of diversity and also the beauty of the Black experience, which is very unique to who she is. So I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah, you know, I wonder, and I think in her case in particular, because as you open the show up with it, sort of phenotypically, you know, we also know biracial folk. Bob Marley was biracial, but there was no way you were going to think he was white, right? That particular phenotype puts her in a position to make those decisions in those ways, certainly.
Yeah. And I was just grateful for her sharing her experience.
Right.
I mean, because it's not easy coming and talking about some of those painful moments where you have to check people for being openly ignorant because, you know, they think they're in a place where they can do that.
Just say,
and no one should feel comfortable doing that anyway.
I mean, that's the world we live in, Kharisma.
I know.
This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
Where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next week.